Since I'm getting married, I was wondering if you could give me your guys' room? True. We should switch up the rooms. The two of you starting a new life together will need more space. How about our son sleeps in our daughter's former room, and you, being the daughter-in-law, sleep in the kitchen or somewhere? After all, you are an outsider, teased the relatives of my husband. Strangely, my husband joined in on their laughter. He always obeyed his parents. He didn't care about me at all. I'm done with this. I will sever ties with this family. But before I do, there are a few things I need to tell them. Hey. In the end, you all will be the ones who suffer losses and cry. Witness hell. My name is Alyssa. At 46, I'm someone who loves sweets so much that I tend to buy too many Easter-themed ones during the Easter season. When I'm tired or stressed, eating sweets somehow brings me relief. I currently find solace in sweets, but there was a time in my life when no matter what I did, I couldn't relieve my stress. That was in my 30s. I was troubled by my husband's family. The reason was that I didn't get along well with my husband's relatives. It wasn't a clear discord, but our ideas were so different that I had to restrain myself to avoid conflict. The reason for our disagreements was that Mandy, my husband's sister, didn't have a steady job, was lax in her romantic relationships, and instead of criticizing her, my mother-in-law defended her, saying, "It's fine the way it is." 5 years had passed since we had gotten married, but during that time, Mandy probably worked only for about 2.5 years. Even though I was a family member, when we first met at the wedding reception, she wasn't employed and shockingly greeted me with a casual yo. At that time, she had just quit her previous job and seemed to be job hunting, but she didn't stick with any part-time jobs for long. The reasons for quitting were frequently due to inappropriate attitudes or tardiness, which led to her either being fired or forced to quit by colleagues. She didn't regret her actions and seemed to think, "It's fine because my parents support me." Positively, you could describe her as unemployed, negatively as a moocher. Her relationships with men were also chaotic, and there were incidents where men she dated came to the house, causing disputes over her. The arguments weren't about who will you choose, but rather, they shouted, "Give back the money. Were you cheating? What? Dating 3 people at once?" For such reasons, these men gathered at her place. It's not every day that you see such dramatic confrontations in real life. I wish her parents would scold her, but both her mother and father continued to spoil her, since the age gap between my husband and her was quite significant. Knowing the story of my father, who accumulated debt, and my mother, who was tormented by it and passed away, her dependent behavior was extremely frustrating to me. As an adult, she should be independent and not rely on her parents, I thought to myself, but as her sister-in-law, I felt I shouldn't speak out loudly. Currently, there are no direct problems between my husband and me, but his family's home is someone else's house. I was thinking of observing the situation when we would like to live with you guys. Huh? It was a sudden suggestion from my mother-in-law when we visited her home at the end of the year. Apparently, the house they had bought was getting old and seemed about to collapse. "It's a good opportunity, so let's live together," she said. I had no idea what was good about this, but living with them was not something I desired. I can't imagine living together under one roof. I absolutely couldn't accept living together. It was, however, hard to say directly how I felt, so I gently refused, saying, "It's important for us as a couple to have our time together." However, my husband tended to listen to his father, and when he said, "We want you to look after us as we get older," he couldn't argue back. As time went by, I gradually began to think, considering the future, maybe it would be practical to live together. As I started to be swayed by my parents' suggestion, I absolutely have to refuse. Of course, living with my husband's parents meant that girl would also be included. It was like a course menu for a great price. Yeah, not really. Why don't we try living together? If you don't like it, we can build a new house. Now is the chance since our current house is getting old, my mother-in-law blurted out. Once you start living together on a trial basis, the trial tends to become permanent real fast. We might end up living together for life. It's strange for someone planning to build a house to suggest cohabitation. Since my husband seemed likely to agree, I had to speak up. "I'm sorry, but if we consider living together or a multi-generational house, how will we handle the purchase costs? What about daily living expenses? If these aren't clear, I feel uneasy about living together." Hearing this, my mother-in-law looked displeased and retorted, "We live on a pension and can't afford it. I understand that. But what about your daughter? She's currently unemployed, and you are covering her insurance and taxes with your pension. Wouldn't the burden be lessened if she started working? So what you're saying is, you want my daughter to find a job and share the expenses?" Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Watching the tense exchange between me and his mother, my husband stepped in to mediate. If Mandy were here, the situation would have been even more complicated. Luckily, she was out with her new boyfriend today, unaware that we were arguing about her. As the atmosphere became tense, my father-in-law said, "I have my retirement fund and savings, so it's fine," and my husband added, "I have income too." Everyone but me was trying to finalize the decision to live together. Looking closely at the conversation, the option of living together gradually became a reality and almost a definite decision. Without any opportunity to express my opinion, our cohabitation was quickly solidified and a decision was made. My husband promised not to inconvenience me, but somewhere in my heart, I couldn't fully believe that promise would be kept in an environment where we lived with his mother and sister. I hoped for no trouble but had to brace myself for reality. My love for my husband remained, but seeing how obedient he was to his parents filled me with complex emotions. While I understood the importance of being considerate to his parents, I also wished my husband would be more reliable, a desire that swirled with disappointment in my heart. Then, an unexpected problem arose. "Sorry, Alyssa." My husband apologized, kneeling before me, triggering a mix of worry and curiosity about what had happened. "What's going on all of a sudden?" "The company's going bankrupt. I got the notice today." His words revealed the shocking truth that his company was going bankrupt. "What?" was all I could say, shocked and bewildered, with the moment etched clearly in my memory. "Is the company really going bankrupt?" I wished it was a joke. "What's happening?" I asked. "Since the management change, the company's performance has been declining. The new employees faced unpaid wages and bonus cuts," my husband explained. His company wasn't small by any means. As a regional enterprise, it was considered mid-sized. But for such issues to surface so suddenly, were there no signs beforehand? I was astonished, to tell you the truth. The new president embezzled funds, and as a result, his wife and the former president decided to close the business. "The details aren't clear, but they probably couldn't secure loans," my husband continued. "Moreover, the president's wife decided to get a divorce, adding family turmoil to financial problems. If the company is destined to collapse, we have to accept it. Luckily, I have a job and savings. You can start looking for new employment," I said optimistically, but my husband hesitated, about that. Seeing his troubled expression, I asked directly, "Is there another problem?" After a pause, he revealed a shocking fact. My husband had signed on as a guarantor for a colleague's loan. That colleague had just become a parent. He had been facing non-payment of his salary, bonus cuts, inability to pay the home mortgage, and also had student loans to repay. Despite not doing anything wrong, he was financially cornered. He didn't want to burden his wife, so he had the company's situation and resorted to borrowing money from loan sharks. He had asked my husband to be the guarantor. Just hearing the circumstances was heart-wrenching, but ultimately, my husband was abandoned by his colleague, leaving him to shoulder a massive debt alone. This situation had started 2 months ago, and my husband seemed to have optimistically thought it was manageable since he still had a stable job and salary. I couldn't help but hold my head in disbelief. "Never in my dreams did I think we would end up in such a situation," my regretful husband said, leaving me utterly speechless. "Isn't that a bit too optimistic?" I wanted to interject, but I had no energy left to voice my thoughts. "What will happen to the house we're supposed to live in with your parents? You said we're processing the mortgage this coming weekend. I'm truly sorry, but could you please register the house under your name? I'm worried about the financial institution's review because of my debt." The issue isn't just about that. Isn't stopping the purchase an option? We've looked at many properties, but none had as good conditions as that house we liked. If we look for a similar one, we might lose a place for my parents to live in. Realistically, living in our current small home with this family wasn't feasible. The family had already set a date to let go of their current residence. There were reasonable points in what he said, but I also was against it. "At least, you should tell your parents about your unemployment and reconsider living together. That is, are you hesitant to expose your failed self to your parents?" When I asked, my husband didn't respond. "I understand. I'll talk to your parents." "No, don't. I'll do it. It's okay. I'll explain everything properly." While saying this, my husband firmly grasped my shoulder, trying to persuade me. "Are you sure that's okay?" I asked for confirmation, and he firmly replied, "Yes." However, later, after my husband reportedly informed his parents about his unemployment, he told me, "They said it would be troublesome if we backed out of living together now. There's no income to help with the mortgage payments on their side either." Honestly, I had anticipated such a response. I couldn't imagine my husband standing up to his parents. And sadly, the predictable response did dilute my affection. In such times, I wished my husband had tried harder. The house eventually was purchased under my name, and I was responsible for repaying the mortgage for the time being. Once my husband found employment again and repaid his debts, he would transfer the mortgage payments to my account monthly. In this scenario, the burden of supporting our finances shifted to me, and I would likely be providing for all our living expenses. I didn't know the exact amount of debt my husband had, but I presumed it to be the amount borrowed to support the family for a few months. I'm certain the unemployment benefits wouldn't be able to cover the whole debt in a lump. It was unclear how long it would take my husband to find new employment and how long this financial difficulty would last. Divorce might have to be considered. However, I haven't completely lost sympathy for my unemployed husband. I decided to view this situation as a trial for our marriage. Despite everything, there was a part of me that couldn't bring myself to dislike my kind husband. Since I chose him, my desire to support him as a woman until the end remains strong. However, I now feel that my initial thought was naive. After discussing with my husband, we eventually agreed that I would bear the living expenses until he repaid the debt, which turned out to be higher than I imagined at $70,000. Although I had doubts about whether the junior actually spent all $70,000 on living expenses and childbirth costs, verifying that now would have been too late. The amount of debt remained unchanged, and all we could do was seriously consider how to deal with it going forward. The economy was in a downturn, and job hunting for my husband in his 30s was not straightforward. He worked in auto parts manufacturing and didn't have any special skills that were particularly valuable in a specific industry. Although he tried to find a job in the same field, the trend to prioritize younger employees was strong, and companies welcoming older workers like my husband were rare. If it were a so-called toxic company, there might have been more opportunities for employment. Thus, my husband began living with his family without securing a job, even after the unemployment benefits ended. We had informed my in-laws about his unemployment status. I was hoping that the family would realize they couldn't entirely rely on us. About 3 months into our cohabitation, we were receiving $200 a month from my husband's parents as household expenses. This amount equated to about $60 per person when including their daughter. Were they taking us lightly? They hardly did any housework, leaving it all to me. I complained to my husband, but he just responded with, "My parents are old, so please help out as much as you can. Support should mean assistance to those who can act independently, right?" Yet, my father and mother-in-law did nothing but lie on the sofa all day. They were capable of doing things themselves, so technically there should have been nothing they needed support with. Should I just assist with slouching around in bed while neglecting all other household chores? I had hoped for a peaceful and harmonious relationship upon starting our life together. But that hope quickly faded, and I found myself irritated almost every day. I was eventually bold enough to negotiate with my husband's parents, asking, "Could you possibly increase the living expenses a bit?" When I took a firm stance, the parents were equally steadfast in their response, citing various excuses like we had little pension in our time or one needs $200,000 for a good retirement. They objected to getting their daughter a job, claiming, "We don't want to limit her future with our selfishness. It's not a matter of ego to make their daughter work. After all, employment is a duty for all citizens." As I began to feel that I can't take it anymore, I also started to sense my affection for my husband gradually fading. Since we started living together, I found myself questioning my husband more and more, saying, "Whose side are you on anyway?" I thought he would support me, but at one word from his father, he'd easily switch his stance, saying, "That perspective is important too." Ultimately, he would persuade me to follow his parents' wishes. Where did the promise of not inconveniencing me go when we decided to live together? Moreover, living with Mandy was a nightmare. When I tried to relax at home on occasional off days during the week, she would bring her boyfriend over and start getting intimate in her room. While she was free to do whatever she wanted in her room, a little consideration as cohabitants would have been appreciated. Despite being at home, I faced uncomfortable and restless days. Then, one day, listen, I'm getting married," Mandy exclaimed cheerfully during dinner, a rare occasion for her to join the family meal as she was usually out with some guy at this hour. Wondering what she meant, she suddenly spread out a signed marriage certificate on the table, declaring, "Look, I'm getting married." Her parents froze for a moment, asking, "Huh? With whom?" "With my current boyfriend," Mandy replied, but given her frequent changes in partners, it was unclear which man she was referring to. She hadn't formally introduced him to her parents, and they were asking for details like, "How long have you been together?" "About 3 months, I guess." "It was love at first sight," she said with a smile, making my husband and me exchange worried glances, thinking, "Is this really okay?" It seemed like a path leading to divorce. Yet her parents, with a vague reason like, "If our daughter has chosen him, it's fine," fully believed in her happiness, even casually signing as witnesses. "I want him to live here too. But my room is a bit small." "True," her mother agreed, surprisingly supportive of her daughter and her husband's cohabitation. Their acceptance of the situation made me feel profoundly uncomfortable. "Since I'm getting married, I was wondering if you could give me your guy's room?" "Huh?" At her suggestion, my husband frowned. Then he looked at me, seeking agreement with a look that said, "This is impossible, right?" Certainly, it was a no-go. I didn't understand why he hesitated. He should have refused immediately. "Please, it's okay, right?" she pleaded, and the in-laws said, "You should give in a bit." Unable to bear it, I strongly retorted, "This is far too selfish." Then she suddenly said, "Hot Ali, aren't you happy about my marriage?" in a cloyingly sweet manner. She usually never called me Ali. "We should switch up the rooms. The two of you starting a new life together will need more space. How about our son sleeps in our daughter's former room, and you, being the daughter-in-law, sleep in the kitchen or somewhere? After all, you are an outsider." My mother-in-law teased. My father-in-law also chuckled. "Indeed, that's a good idea." Even as a joke, this was unpleasant. My husband, too, got caught up in the atmosphere and joined in with a haha, agreeing with his parents. I was truly disappointed. "A kitchen? That's not even a room." Mandy laughed along. "Well, someone who's always doing chores might as well belong in the kitchen," the mother-in-law added. "Exactly. After all, there are no rooms left, so outsiders should just leave," the daughter said, and her parents nodded in agreement. "Exactly." Despite the family's abnormal excitement, my husband did not intervene, and I was left without an ally. "Go on, get out," she gestured dismissively at me. My mother-in-law mockingly suggested, "Maybe sleeping in the park isn't such a bad idea." Everyone was against me. "Is that really okay with you? You do realize that your son doesn't have a job right now. Have you considered what will happen if I leave? Life will get harder, you know?" To my question, the mother-in-law responded, "Our son has a little savings, and if he finds a job, it shouldn't be a problem. It's just temporary." The family didn't know that my husband was burdened with a significant debt. He said he didn't want to talk about it, so we kept it a secret. Whatever the reason, he probably thought they would despise him if the debt came to light. "How can you say such a thing? Have you forgotten that I purchased this house? What nonsensical thing are you talking about?" My mother-in-law retorted, and seeing her confused face, I momentarily thought, she's playing dumb. But it seemed she genuinely didn't grasp what I was saying. When I shot a sharp glance at my husband, he lost color in his face and slowly avoided my gaze. From his reaction, I understood everything. This man has been claiming he bought the house. In other words, this family doesn't realize that I bought the house and have been supporting the entire family. They were oblivious and arrogant while being supported by me. It's like the story of the emperor's new clothes. This is turning into quite an interesting situation. I had a slight hope that my husband would finally confess. "Actually, there are no savings." But it seems I expected too much. "Fine, let them all face the harsh reality once. I don't mind. I'd rather be homeless in the park than live with you," I declared and locked myself in the bedroom. My husband's family seemed to mock me. How disgraceful for her to make a scene about leaving and then hide in the house. But there was a reason I didn't leave the house immediately. Over the next week, I sorted my belongings and prepared to leave the home we shared. I found an apartment for myself, and everything was ready. 2 days after I left the house, they came to my new place. "What is this all about?" my mother-in-law shouted, holding the divorce papers I had left behind in the old house. Because I had written "Please send the divorce papers by mail" with the address on a note, they managed to track me down. "What do you mean? What are you referring to?" I replied with a smile. "We heard that the recycling company came and took everything, the fridge, the TV, all of it." "Did you do that?" They continued. "Yes, of course. I left that house with the divorce papers behind. Why should I leave my belongings in a house I won't return to?" I calmly asked. "What? Were you not aware? The refrigerator, TV, washing machine, and even the sofa you were using were all purchased by me. To claim you bought them yourself." My mother-in-law was pompous. "Property acquired during marriage is considered joint property. So those belong to my son as well. Why dispose of them without permission?" My husband slowly hid behind his assertive mother, losing all color. Still no explanation from him. I sighed. Why does the man I once loved seem so small now? When feelings fade, they really do appear smaller. I purchased those household items with my personal funds before we got married. What? Moreover, I'm not just selling the furniture. I'm currently in the process of selling the house as well. Huh? What? My in-laws exclaimed loudly, looking at each other in shock. Behind them, Mandy stood still, astonished. Really? That house is under our son's name, right? There should be mortgage payments. I bought that house outright with my own money. I told my husband that we were paying for the house with a mortgage and the furniture with savings. When my husband, surprised, asked, "Why tell such a lie?" To care for my unemployed husband and in-laws. It was financially easier to pay in full from savings than to make monthly mortgage payments. Plus, it allowed me to prepare various strategies in case of persecution from you. I'm glad I did. I said to them, "Did you really think I had made no plans before living with you?" For people who think 3 adults can live on $200 a month. This must be hard to understand, I said with a hint of sarcasm. I have friends in real estate and another acquaintance interested in property management. I've been in touch with them, and we're moving along with the paperwork. You didn't notice because we didn't go through an agent, did you? As I smiled sweetly, the family gradually began to grasp the grim situation, and their faces became pale. My father-in-law, infuriated, confronted my husband. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Shouting. My husband, tears in his eyes, could only apologize softly. "I'm sorry. He's always been submissive to his father." I felt good about filing for divorce. But what should I do about my married life? Mandy's naive question left my mother-in-law speechless and at a loss. Indeed, she would be. Losing the house and assets, with children who were unemployed. With me gone, they'll have to get by on a meager pension and insufficient retirement funds. My mother-in-law, staring at her daughter, asked seriously, "How much does your future husband earn?" She replied, "He makes his living from slot machines." "He's a slot professional," made me burst into laughter, watching the bewildered husband and his parents. A professional slot player? Does that even exist? Regardless, it's clear that it's an unstable profession and full of self-proclaimed experts. Her choice of partner was obviously questionable. My mother-in-law turned to me, "Sorry about the other day. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's get along." She offered an apology and suggested reconciliation. No, not at all. There was no misunderstanding. Our values just never aligned. "What are you talking about?" Haha. As I laughed loudly, she insisted, "Don't reject so quickly. There must have been some misunderstanding, but I completely denied it. Are you planning to abandon the family?" My father-in-law glared at me. But when I retorted, "Wasn't it your wife who treated me as an outsider first?" He fell silent. "Just wait. To treat me so coldly. We once lived under the same roof." My mother-in-law raised her voice. "Yes, we did live together and I took care of you. That's precisely why I can't live with you anymore," I replied. My husband pleaded, "Please reconsider. If you had been even a little bit more supportive, perhaps my feelings would have changed. But it's too late now." "I'm not inclined to," I rejected. I casually dismissed my husband's plea. "Don't use such words. Difficulties are part of family life," my mother-in-law implored desperately. Mandy nodded in agreement, hoping for support through their troubles. Difficulties. If you call it that, why not try living in the park? Overcome those difficulties as a family, without relying on an outsider like me. When their own words were thrown back at them, my mother-in-law and Mandy blushed and accused me. "How cruel can you be? What will you do without me? How do you plan to live?" I asked, and they were silent. I felt slightly satisfied. I was just about to get married. Mandy lamented, and my mother-in-law comforted her daughter. "It's truly unfortunate how things turned out. If only they had raised her to be independent, this wouldn't have happened. Too much coddling, too optimistic." Thinking back, my husband becoming a guarantor for a colleague's debt and clinging to a struggling company also highlighted this family's characteristic. It makes sense now. This indulgence was inherited from the mother's side. So I said, "But I believe your worries are unfounded," leaving the family dumbfounded. I then revealed, "There might be a possibility that your daughter's husband might have another lover." The family was shocked. "What?" Seeing that, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Mandy asked, "What do you mean with possibility?" "Well, it's hard to say who, since you change boyfriends so frequently. But if it's the recent one, he's been quite close with a woman living on the first floor of this apartment." Huh? They were astonished. a classic case of the answer being right under their nose. On the day I moved here, I happened to see Mandy's latest boyfriend, presumably her fiancé, entering and leaving the apartment of the woman living on the first floor, visiting at night and leaving in the morning. Such behavior seemed indicative of a romantic relationship. Could be his sister or something, though I doubt it. Have you heard anything? I inquired, and Mandy fell silent. Her silence suggested that the man visiting the woman's place was likely her fiancé. I can't believe I was deceived, she muttered, collapsing to her knees. Furious, she tried to contact him, but he hung up as soon as she explained the situation. I can't believe it. This is outrageous. Mandy exploded in anger. My mother-in-law attempted to calm her, but Mandy's fury was unstoppable. As the family chaos unfolded, I secretly enjoyed the spectacle. So, I've made my decision. I'll sign the divorce papers, okay, dear? My husband had no response. I know you don't have much in assets, but you've set aside some savings for the worst-case scenario, right? I'll claim that in the division of property. Huh? He was stunned, but I smiled. That's only fair. I might have seemed like a devil to him, but this was merely justice. Forced to care for your parents, I had every right to seek compensation. I had the family and my husband move out of the house, and I started a new chapter in my life. Later, Mandy frequently appeared at my former apartment. Specifically, she caused trouble between the man she intended to marry and the woman he truly loved, eventually involving the police. It turned out the woman living in my apartment was the real fiancé. Mandy was serious about him, but the marriage promise was her own delusion. He had merely been toying with her. A harsh reality for her, but an inevitable outcome. Furthermore, having lost their home and assets, the family pinned their hopes on my husband's savings. But my demand for property division crushed those hopes. Thus, the family bonds frayed even more. At first, my husband was blamed for this due to his lack of management, but unable to withstand the pressure, he finally snapped and had a fierce argument with his mother. It's because you keep defending Mandy that we've ended up in this situation. It's your fault that my wife is angry, he argued, directing the blame towards his parents. He then proposed to me. I've reconsidered my thoughts and decided to distance myself from my parents. Can't you consider us getting back together? I was surprised and confused by this unexpected proposal for remarriage. My husband's naivety hasn't changed. My father-in-law, previously submissive, showed his anger when his son lashed out. The family conflict escalated, leading to the realization that the root problem was Mandy not working, but it was already too late, evolving into a significant domestic dispute. As a result, the family split. Despite wishing for separation or divorce, my husband's parents continued living together for financial reasons, barely speaking to each other. My husband, who found re-employment at a company with a dormitory, had to quit just a few months later due to health issues as the company turned out to be exploitative. Mandy had no choice but to work when she suddenly found herself in the middle of a lawsuit from the wife of a married man she had been in a previous relationship with. Because regular jobs paid little, she chose nightlife work, but ended up harming her health due to the alcohol. My husband and Mandy had to rely and cooperate with their parents. Despite their estrangement, the family formed a peculiar living arrangement, staying together. Relying on others ultimately comes at a cost. Meanwhile, after the divorce, I started focusing on my own career. Previously prioritizing family, I avoided overtime and declined promotions, but changing my work approach led to a promotion to area manager at an apparel manufacturer. The job wasn't easy and had some dark aspects, but the relationships were good and I had a sense of fulfillment. I was satisfied with the salary, and above all, it was an enjoyable workplace. Currently single, I'm open to the thrill of romance but continue to prioritize my job for now. You're asking if there's anything new. Truth be told, the real estate agent who handled the sale of my house recently invited me to dinner. Having known him for a while, he's been a good person to talk to during stressful times post-divorce. I hadn't considered him romantically before, but lately I've felt a bit attracted to him, especially after he celebrated my birthday. In a tipsy moment, he said, "Life would be fun if you were my wife." Could that indicate his interest in me? But I might be overthinking it. After all, I'm not so young anymore to get carried away so easily. Yet, if there is mutual affection, perhaps progressing the relationship might be worth considering. For now, though, I want to savor this sweet mood a bit longer. That's the plan for now.